when I was in my mid-20s, I was in a graduate program, a counseling program, and I was doing my residency at a mental health agency, and this little flyer came across my desk on neurolinguistic programming, and I asked my supervisor, "What do you think of this?" And he said, "It's the cream." And I was like, "Of course I want cream," you know. And so I followed up with it, and it was so mind-blowing to me that I dropped out of my graduate program and pursued NLP exclusively. So it turned my reality, 180. And I thought, I don't know what this is, but I need to know it. And it's been the foundation of everything I've done since. And so I really have felt like it's an important piece of what we're doing and an important piece of my life. So I'd like to share it with you, at least some of it. And in fact, it was so important that I named my son after my first trainer. And he has a very weird middle name. His name is Thomas Fairhurst Christofferson. It's very regal, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and are either one of you familiar with NLP at all?
Well, after I met with you the first time, and I
Okay.
think you did some of that, I
Okay.
did look it up, but just to read an article on the internet.
Okay. So I'm just going to start with just one of the cornerstones of NLP, which is how we map our reality from the time we're conceived even. And I'm going to put up my little board here and work with it a little bit. And then when I've given this little foundational piece, then we can talk about why it's important to ask the right questions. And Jody, I'm probably surprising you, but I'm going for it.
No, I mean, I'm right with you.
Okay, good. So I have my crude little pieces up here, and I'm gonna work with them.
Great.
So, so when you first enter the field of neurolinguistic programming, and one of the very foundational pieces that you learn is that this little brain up here of ours can only receive information through the five senses: the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, the gustatory, and the olfactory, taste and smell. So everything that feeds into your reality, that begins to associate within the neural networks, that builds your world, has to come in through those five senses. And so what you end up with is a kind of a sensory soup in your brain of pictures, words, feelings, tastes, and smells. And then they start to grow into structures, and language gets attached, language gives meaning to the clusters of sensory bits, like a house on the corner. I can use the words a house on the corner of the street, and you go into your neural networks and begin putting pieces together very quickly and form that picture in your head. And so one of the mind-blowing parts for me when I first started to study this was, and you hear it in NLP training, you hear it 100 times at least, the map is not the territory. What you end up with through this sensory input is it's like a map of reality. It is not reality. And the reason this matters is if it was reality, it would probably be unchangeable. Since it's just the way that you have mapped your reality, the roads, the link ups, everything can be changed. And it took me a lot of practice and a lot of learning to begin to believe that. But if a pathway has been set in the brain, like let's say a trauma pathway or a fear pathway that's been set up by one thing associating with the other, with the other, with the other, it's just a habit of the brain. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Mhm.
fixed. And so one of the study of my life has really been how to shift neural pathways into another direction. If you wake up every morning with fear, and the fear makes you not want to get out of bed, and are you stuck with that pathway forever, that pattern, or can it be shifted? And if it can be shifted, how do you shift it? And so and it sounds like such a simplistic way to think about it, but the brain is wily, and there's not just a few impressions up there, there's a lot of impressions. And so I'm going to show you a little bit. So these are like paving stones of NLP. One of the things that the developers noticed in the development of NLP is we have a tendency to favor one sensory system over another. So I'm going to show you those. You like my little pieces?
Yep.
Jody, I told you I bought these little flat discs to go with, possible use with the kits,
Right.
but I'm finding another use for them. Okay, so if you look at me once, and when I'll tell you how I'm built. So I tend to be very visual and kinesthetic, kind of in a matched weight. And when you're talking to me, one of the things the developers of NLP, through mapping and decoding all of this, they saw that the direction that you move your eyes can indicate which part of the brain you're using and what you are accessing. And so if you see me go up, left, I'm going into the stored material and pulling out pictures. Sandra, you go way up. Your eyeballs almost scan the ceiling when you're grabbing pictures. And these are, the cool part is these are visible cues of how a person is processing that we can use when we're asking questions. And in fact, we can even be leading it. Like when I said the house on the corner of the street, my language caused you to go into your brain and put a picture together. How many of you were able to see a house on the corner of the street? Yeah. So my language is not only putting my reality together, but it's asking you to put your reality together in a certain way. And the interesting part and the most important part is that every house on the corner of those streets is different. So we didn't all see the same house. We went, put it together, gathered it up, and saw the house that we saw. And so part of our goal when we're asking questions is to constantly inquire how or what was the picture they made. I can't assume that your house looks like my house. I have to find out what your house looks like. Was it a big house? Was it a little house? Was it blue? So our job in working with people is to inquire into how they have stored the material in their map of the world. So the first system is the visual, and I'm not going to go too complex or too deeply into this, but I want to put it out there so that you can have some fun watching over the next week, watching people's eyes. And so a visual person tends to be very put together, like they pay attention to visual detail. They don't really like messes. This is very general. They very often will even finish sentences for people because that other person's not processing quite fast enough. Like, okay, I got it. So that visual processing is very quick. Picture, 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 picture. I could speed out a list of words and you would be making pictures. And so when you look, I would say from my own observation and the observation of others, probably 70 to 80% of American society is very visual. Okay. So the auditory and the eye movement for, if you look at me once, the eye movement for the auditory is down left. And when the auditory goes down left, they're talking to themselves. And so it's an internal monologue or dialogue going on inside that's constantly, and I find that the computer techs, the accountants, the mechanical engineers, that whole engineering field practically, very auditory. They problem solve by talking it through to themselves. If A equals B, then what about C? If C leads to D, what about E? So that's very methodical. What was that look, Sandra?
Oh, you're on mute.
I can't hear you.
You're on mute, Sandra.
Sorry, that was just because my son just came in to show me that he'd solved my computer problem
Oh,
partly,
you look
and
so
that
happy.
and to retrieve the dog. Yes.
Okay. Okay,
That's
good.
why.
Good.
Sorry. And I'll leave it muted and see how things go. But if
Okay.
I do that, it's because of the dog.
Okay.
That's okay. We just thought you were talking and then we couldn't hear you. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we
Sorry.
thought you were talking to us, I mean.
Yes,
No.
we are in pay attention mode here.
Right. Right.
Okay, so the so general characteristics about an auditory is the processing is much slower. So that's the one that the visuals want to finish sentences for. And also because the eye movement comes away and breaks eye contact, very often if you're in a relationship with a very strong auditory person, you may feel like they're not listening to you, or they're not paying attention, or they don't care. We make all kinds of interpretations about the auditory when they're down here doing their processing. And my first husband was an electrical engineer. And when I first studied NLP, I just came away like this, like, oh my God, that's why, because I would say, let's go to a movie Friday night. And he'd go, and I'd be like, okay, where did he go? And so this very much clarifies relationship differences. And for some bizarre reason, we're very often attracted to the people who are opposite of us, So that auditory, when you're living with an auditory or working with an auditory, you have to give them more time to think through something. It's very useful to, like the visuals will use actual visual words. Can you see what I'm saying? And the auditory will say, it doesn't sound right. And you like Sandra, what you were saying about feeling out of touch with that business language, when you're communicating in two totally different systems, you feel like you're just bypassing one another sometimes and not understanding. And so our goal is not to just label anybody, but to recognize that they're all good systems. But sometimes we have to bend and flex to them more often and give the auditory time to process and think through. And a lot of the strong auditory people are just brilliant. They speak in a language you wouldn't understand. Okay, so the third, and there's only three main systems. Taste and smell really play into how we've stored sensory impressions and mapped our world, but they tend not to become dominant. Although I worked with an artist one time, and a very important sensory memory for her was the smell of her first box of crayons. She could remember the smell of the box of crayons, I thought that was cool. So the kinesthetic means movement and in the body. And like if you watch Jody sometimes when she's getting going, I'm going to talk to you, Jody. You'll see she's accessing visual, but then she starts to build things, you know? And
Or I'll say, call me, send me an email.
yeah. She's doing sign language. And Lisa, you're very kinesthetic too. So the kinesthetic moves through the world by how it feels and is very attentive to their comfort and their like kinesthetics. Like if I was buying a couch, kinesthetic is a very strong system for me. If I was buying a couch, it would have to feel right. It could be the most gorgeous couch in the world, but if it didn't feel right, I would not buy it, you know? And I used to, when I was teaching this on a regular basis, I used to say, the visuals will go through a fabric store and notice color and pattern and like that. The kinesthetics will go through the fabric store like this. Does it feel right, you know? And the auditories wouldn't be caught dead in a fabric store. So that's my assessment. So the kinesthetics also will linguistically, they grab onto that feeling language. Like if you're trying to show them something, but they can't grasp it, they'll tell you, I can't get a handle on this. So they will literally tell you how they're putting their internal reality together with language, or it just doesn't feel right.
Mhm.
The auditories will say, this sounds really good to me, or I need to talk it over with myself. So people are constantly giving you very, very specific cues about how they're processing their map of the world. And the more we learn to listen, build our awareness, frame it out, let more come to us, the more understanding we get of how they have mapped their world. And in this instance, knowledge is power. The more you listen and watch and attend, the more information you get in general about any situation that's going on. And when this is what I'm showing you right now is what threw me out of my graduate program. I wanted to know everything I could know about this.